York, Starlink slashes internet price by 45% in Nigeria. Nigeria can leverage its 200 trillion cubic feet of gas reserves to drive industrial development, says Mele Kyari. And oil consolidate gains amid concerns of worsening Middle East crisis. Asia markets tumble as U.S. inflation stalks higher for longer rate worries. China CPI slows down. Plus, more opportunities as Nigeria prepares to begin commodity exports through the African Continental Free Trade Area this month is in focus. Business Express is reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us at this time, and it's that time we talk business, and we have this morning with us Paul Alaji, senior economist, SPM, joining us on the program to talk about the economy of Africa. Good to have you join us at this time. Moving on, Nigerian business magnates Aliko Dangote is calling on captains of industry to continue to partner the government for betterment of the country and in the interest of the citizens. The entrepreneur, another business tycoon, Femi Otedola and Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State were part of the visitors who paid a Salah homage at the Lagos residence of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The visit was an opportunity to also discuss the economy, as there is always the need for collaboration between the public and private sectors for the good of all Nigerians.
Well, my own short measure is for us to now actually partner with the government and make sure that we better the life of the citizens of the country, you know, because it's like clapping. You can't clap with one hand. So both the entrepreneurs and the government, they need to clap together and make sure that it is in the best interest of everybody.
In government's efforts in checking the deterioration of Naira value in the foreign exchange market, Aliko Dangote believes benefits of various efforts will continue to manifest in other sectors of the economy.
And I'm sure when the inflation figures are out for the next month, you see that there's quite a lot of improvement in the inflation rate. So step at a time, and I'm sure the government is working round the clock to make sure that things get much better, because it's in the interest of everybody for Nigerians to get things better.
Some of the challenges that we witnessed at the beginning of the year, we're beginning to see even some ease, even faster than we had expected. We're beginning to see some gradual ease, on economic pressure. We're not out completely yet, but we're beginning to see the ease of it. And we as leaders have to now even double up our efforts to do the work faster and quicker, so that the citizens can have that, ease that they all are craving for.
Now, a cross-section of Port Harcourt residents want relevant authorities to adequately project consumer rights. This is even as some call on business community in Nigeria to bring their conscience to bear in the conduct of transactions in view of the rising value of Naira.
I'm happy with the rise in the value of the currency Naira, but what I'm also concerned about is the effect on the common man in terms of the cost of goods and services.
Definitely there must be a price control board. If there is no price control board, whatever goes up will never come down.
There is supposed to be a standing regulatory body, and when it comes to times like this, that's the time they should work. Whoever is in place, we should now push them to go around, check the market, look at the prices of things. What is the response on the general public?
There are a lot of things they could do. They can equally advertise the price of a particular good. See, this today, rice, a bag of rice is 40,000. If you don't sell it, in fact, command people to come and buy. And before you know it, their price will come down.
While we look forward to measures to be taken to ensure that prices of commodities are actually reduced, let's take a trip to the commodities market to see what it's trading and for how much. Now is the second year of business on Africa's biggest trading platform, that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. 8 countries of Cameroon, Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, Mauritius, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Tunisia are already participating in the FCFTA Guided Trade Initiative. Now we examine how economic growth through regional integration can reduce poverty, cut inequality, and foster the inclusive development pillars of the AU's Agenda 2063. And joining us from our Ibadan studio is Paul Alaje. He's a senior economist with the SPM Professionals. You're welcome to Business Express.
So much for having me.
Great. Now, 2 years on, we have seen 8 countries participating in the first batch of the Guided Trade Initiative, though Nigeria is kind of out of the action for the first batch. And we understand at this particular point in time this month, Nigeria is actually ready to join the second batch. What is your take? What should we expect?
I'll say it's good news that Nigeria want to participate in Africa Continental Free Trade Area business. The good news is that with Nigerian participation, there are a number of things we can sell to the rest of Africa, and there are some things we can buy from the rest of Africa. The currency of trade is where I have concern, which I believe that in the coming period, authorities among African nations will find a solution to that regard. This has made Africa to have a single border with which there will be free flow of goods from one country to another. Nigeria, areas where we have comparative cost advantage, we can leverage on those and sell to the rest of African nations. When that is done, it will mean that we will reduce imports from other countries and also promote exports among other African nations. The good news again is that trading among African nations is expected to grow, which means our growth and our exposure will not just be to the rest of the world, but we can interact with ourselves as black people and also as African. So all around, for me, African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is a major gain for the entire continent.
From your concern about the currency of trade, yes, we understand that all over Africa, most of African countries, we tend to peg our currency to the almighty dollar, as it were, and a foreign exchange challenge like Nigeria is having, we're having same happening in Egypt and some other countries. Yes, also before now we've had proposals by ECOWAS to have a single currency, talking about the ECO. While that is being processed, we are having the PAPs coming into play. How are all of this, how would they play out in this currency of exchange when we talk about trading amongst ourselves?
Well, it's going to be very interesting at the beginning, and the impact may really be low if we are not using single currency for this trade. A good example is the Eurozone, where Euro was designed and is being used as a currency of exchange. For us, in Nigeria and the rest of Africa, we have recommended to those authorities in Africa to use the currency called Afrik. Afrik is that currency that will exchange and will be accepted all over the continent of Africa. And that does not mean that one country will have advantage over others. This is what it means. Nigeria has its own foreign reserve, both in dollar and may have some currency, that are not even in dollars. If you go to Ghana, the same thing, dollars. If you go to Tanzania, dollars. If you go to Kenya, dollars. Go to Egypt, dollars. Go to South Africa, dollars. Go to Cameroon, dollars. Go to Sierra Leone, dollars. The question is, apart from Ghana, which other currency is keeping CD? Apart from Nigeria, which other country, I beg your pardon, is keeping the naira? None. So if we come together and we use Afri as our currency in different parts of the world, the strength of whatever we export, either we're exporting from Ghana, or we're exporting from Cameroon, or from Nigeria, or from South Africa, or from Algeria, or Liberia, whichever country we're exporting from, that single currency will have its own strength. That does not mean it may not get devalued, but it will not be as badly devalued as we have the naira or as we have the CD, where we now go back and start looking at the denomination of currency. But because the demand, the strength of this currency will be strong, more so that we are removing the economic borders around African country. What we need to look at is to have a milestone target. Between now and the next 5 years, can we have 50 of all African countries participate? And after 5 years, can we start using Africa as a currency of exchange? Within all African countries, and that will go a long way. We can benchmark it because most of the mineral resources, they are coming from Africa, and there are some countries that must be star countries. That's the truth. For instance, Nigeria. We need to see this window of opportunity right now, especially our Trade and Investment Ministry, and also those in executive. How do we wrap up with power distribution? Of course, starts with generation, transmission, and distribution. If that technology is not helpful to us, can we abandon it and get a fresh technology that can help our industrial line? Because the moment Africa settles for these realities, knowing that having 40 currency and more cannot really be beneficial to us. I see a few African countries, going to support some other countries having a coalition of some sort, perhaps against the dollar. Unfortunately, it may not work. There are 3 strong countries already in Africa that are exporting crude. That includes Nigeria, Liberia, and I think Algeria. When you look at those countries that are exporting crude and their local currency is Africa, what it means is that instead of trading alone with Liberia or trading alone with Algeria, you're also trading with Nigeria. And there are more that are being discovered within the African soil. So that currency, we position Africa as strong, and the economic quagmire we have witnessed over the time will not be the case. So it's good that Nigeria is participating, but authorities, we need to go back to the drawing board to see how we are going to convert what we're exporting among ourselves to not just raw materials, while we still expect the rest of the world to give us finished goods. Can we do the finished good among ourselves and we move our country to the place we want it to be?
Talking about the goods we should be ready to export. Yes, we are used to exporting raw materials, and there is the need for that value addition across the value chain of whatever commodities we're exporting. Let's take, for instance, our biggest export, talking about oil. From trying to refine oil in country, now, yes, we're trying to also increase our export volumes, not just in Africa, but also beyond Africa. Yes, you've mentioned the currency issue. As it is now, as we're starting the guided trade the initiative, the dollar is going to be the exchange rate to the naira alongside the other currencies across the continent and even beyond. How ready are we for this at this particular point in time?
Or trade like this, there is no better time to start. What we need to do is to start. We'll go through the teaching stage. We'll go through the stage of being a toddler. There will be mistakes, there will be errors, but we need to get it one after the other. I think what should have been done is to have actually have a roadmap of the initial stage of trade, which of course should be between 2 to 3 years. I'm happy Tanzania, Cameroon, and a few other countries have already participated, and I think countries such as Nigeria should do that. And let me also explain, connecting the rail line from Lagos perhaps to beyond Castina, it's also to make countries like Nigeria and all other countries to perpetually depend on Nigeria for their imports and perhaps exports too. Because why? They are not close to any coastal line. They have to 100% rely on Nigeria. And if you check this is still part of trade. The concern there is that what is the strength of the economy of such country? So for Nigeria to be robust and play key role, and not just Nigeria, even the rest of Africa, we must understand how to have competitive advantage among ourselves, and also how to convert most African countries to agrarian, land-based, and also raw materials-based economies to some that can manufacture, that can produce, that can also have huge plantation and processing same to the rest of the world. The truth is, if Africa get this correctly, we will not just be considered as the back end of the world, we'll be considered as a force to reckon with in the world. When you look at China's population, over 1 billion, that of India, over 1 billion, what is the strength of China's economy? Single currency is used, even though it's a single nation, single currency is used. And when you look at the demand side, the quality of life, and so on and so forth, it is so strong in China. But Chinese authorities started with a fundamental thing. They knew the importance of getting energy in place, affordable, not just the quantity of light, like we have seen in Nigeria, band A, people with 16 to 20 hours. That is not what matters. That alone is not what matters. What matters is the quality of life. When the light comes, will it not destroy equipment in our factory? Irrespective of the time, the light must be guaranteed and the quality of the same must be strong. That exactly is the argument. And I hope that this is what most African countries should be thinking about, should be doing, and should be implementing in their respective nations.
Well, talking about what is expected by Nigeria and other African countries, you agree with me there has been a lot of paperwork, talking about the ratification, as well as instruments, some other instruments to ensure that we don't just take off, but we take off smoothly. And it has gone beyond our paperwork to implementation on ground, where you've just mentioned the connection, talking about the rail connection from Lagos beyond Katsina and all of that. What other infrastructure do you think needs to be put in place to ensure that we don't just hit the ground, but we hit the ground running, more so that we have the largest market share on the continent?
Internet penetration in Africa needs to improve significantly, because most of this trade will be highly automated if we don't want to start working like people in 16th or 18th century. So internet penetration in Africa, we have to be robust, far better than what we are talking about now. I've been to some part of Africa, and I'm not talking like somebody who have been to Europe or into the Americas. I'm talking as someone who has been to different parts of Africa, and I can tell you that internet penetration in some part of Africa is still is still in a very worrisome state, because the penetration is still extremely poor in part of this world. So leaders must do everything possible, working with private sector, to ensure that internet penetration in Africa is improved. That said, rail connection, because we are talking of movement of goods, this is an economic rule. That means there's mobility of goods and mobility of labor. One mobility of labor can happen through vehicle, could also happen through rail, and most especially through air. But what is important right here is how do we make movement of goods for areas that are not connected via the coastal line, that don't have access to the waterways. How do we connect them via rail? And I think this is something very important. It could start among the sub-region of Central Africa, Southern Africa, of West Africa, the East Africa, and of course, the northern part of Africa. We need to first connect all this line with rail. It is important if we must achieve significant output, significant result. If not, the cost of flying this good or first exporting them to another country, then importing them to another country will be a big challenge. Now, when this transaction finally happens, there will be some countries that will have huge advantage over others. What is important in economics is each country must start looking for their own comparative cost advantage over others. And I think comparative is the key word there that Ghana needs to look for, Nigeria needs to look for, Tanzania needs to look for, Madagascar needs to look for. Where is the comparative cost advantage? And all other countries must already learn that reality for us to say we know that you have this comparative cost. Instead of buying from any other country, you know, outside Africa, it's better we patronize Africa. The good news is that when the demand is stimulated, anywhere you are buying from within Africa, you are telling that market to keep creating jobs. You are telling that market to keep growing income for them. And what that means is that gross domestic product of such country will significantly increase. Employment in such country will also significantly increase. Poverty in such country is expected to go down. So if all of us are producing and we focus on what we are producing on, over 50 of us in Africa, what it means is that in a matter of time, trade among us will significantly improve. GDP, gross domestic product of the entire African continent would increase. And of course, the hope is that authorities within Africa will start putting so much money in infrastructure. Now that this is the focus for Nigeria, which have been the focus for Cameroon and as well as Tanzania, how do we now from our national budget earmark about 10% of the same in the national budget on infrastructure towards this development? And I think this is the way to go. Authority will need to, of course, consider this, especially perhaps when they meet at African Union or whatever platform where they are meeting, such that we can have this infrastructure put in place and for the growth of the entire African nations.
Okay, before I let you go, there has been the issue, talking about the cost comparative advantage that countries should begin to look out for, particularly Nigeria. There has always been this worry about adhering to rules of origin, talking about products to be exported, particularly from Nigeria to other parts of Africa. Yes, you hear we have, I don't want to mention this particular country, but we patronize a lot of their goods. Are we going to move away from Nigeria being a dumping ground to getting some of these products produced in country, adhering to the local content percentage to make it a homegrown product to export? Or are we going to look forward to technology transfer for us to blend with what we have in country to get to export, to have this comparative advantage? What is the way to go?
Well, I will speak broadly. I don't know how much time I have, but we are talking of that popular Asian country where many countries of the world, many countries in Africa are perpetually dependent on them for import. I'll tell you that without revamping our manufacturing, revamping our power sector, revamping our education sector, and revamping our infrastructure, it might be really difficult for us to compete and also export to the rest of Africa in the near term or perhaps in the medium term. What we need to do is to change orientation of our education system, which is very key, from just universities, degrees, and polytechnic certificates into technical education. You know, when China started, it's important we mention the name here. And this is what India have started doing also, and started seeing the results in India. Now, when China started, China understood the importance of education and infrastructure. So while those in private sector and public sector continue to educate people in what? In skill-based learning, not just degree-based learning or just professional-based learning. We have enough of them, a lot of them in Nigeria already, even though we don't still have sufficient. But we need to be deliberate in teaching people on skill-based learning, which includes how can we make tires? How can we, you know, solve some of the challenges that we have based on our consumption pattern? You know, over time, then government, because of infrastructure in power, in road, in rail, will now start, attracting investment into our country. Recall that Mr. President has been going from one country to the other to talk about investment, and we have started seeing, you know, trickles of this investment flow into Nigeria. But what makes this sustainable is when we have all of these with infrastructure in place, then you're going to have real investment in our country. And I've not taken for granted the role of security in all of this. I believe that will be the purview of government and those security agencies to help us combat insecurity once and for all. Now, when this is done and other countries are also specialized in other areas, we can exchange within African continent and of course remove the shackles, the dependency that we have on the rest of the world off our neck. And if we don't do that, unfortunately, my favorite book says the companion of fools shall be destroyed. If we are all exchanging the same thing among ourselves, then there is no really the source of all of the things we are doing might be missing. The light of all of the things we are doing might be missing. So for us to have all of these in place is important for us as a nation to not just depend on the rest of the world for our input, but for us to become independent as Africans and most importantly as Nigeria. So summarily, it's a good news that we are making this move, but most importantly, we must be ready to put useful infrastructure in place, rail, and most importantly, road, and beyond all of those, skill-based education is the way to go. China, that is how it started. Now, the rest of the world started saying that the labor in China is relatively cheaper than what's obtainable in Europe and in America.
That well said. That well said. Thank you so very much, Paul Alaje, for those deep inside at this particular point in time. Now, oil prices held steady in early Asian trading on Thursday after gaining $1 a barrel in a prior session as investors braced for a worsening of the Middle East crisis, potentially involving Iran, the third largest oil producer in OPEC. Now, Brent crude futures advanced by 4 cents to $90.52 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were up 2 cents at $86.24 a barrel. Both contracts rose more than 1% in the prior session after 3 sons of Hamas leader were killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza, feeding worries that ceasefire talks between the two sides might stall. Earlier this week, Israel and Hamas began a fresh round of ceasefire talks in their more than 6-month-old Gaza war, but those talks have not yielded a result. Well, at this point, we say we end Business Express for today. Join us again for another fresh edition tomorrow at 3 p.m.